When we think of animals today, we usually imagine something very ordinary. A dog sleeping on the couch, a cat sneaking through the garden, birds singing in the park, or animals living peacefully in nature. For us, animals are part of everyday life, often in a safe and calm way. But less than 100 years ago, things were very different. During the Second World War, many animals did not live in peace, but in the middle of a world full of noise, fear, and danger. They had different purposes than they do now. They became helpers in the war without understanding what was happening. The Second World War was a massive conflict that took place across almost the entire world. Fighting occurred in cities, forests, mountains, deserts, and icy regions. Today we would use modern technology for such situations, but in the 1940s this technology was still very limited. Radios did not always work, vehicles got stuck, and machines broke down quickly. Therefore, armies relied on something that had been done for centuries. They trusted animals. Animals were strong, reliable, and often able to cope with harsh conditions better than machines. Horses played a very important role. Even though we often think of World War II as a war with tanks, trucks, and modern machines, a large part of the transport was still done by horses. Millions of horses were used by different armies. They pulled heavy cannons and artillery, carried food, ammunition, and other supplies, and helped bring wounded soldiers from the front to field hospitals. In muddy, mountainous, or snowy areas where vehicles got stuck or could not go at all, horses were essential. They could walk on narrow paths and travel long distances in very hard conditions. These animals often worked for many days with little rest, and sometimes almost no food or clean water. They had to endure cold, heat, bombings, and gunfire without any protection. Many horses were injured or died from exhaustion. But for many soldiers, the horses became more than working animals. They gave comfort and a feeling of calm in a chaotic and frightening world. Soldiers talked to their horses, took care of them as well as they could, and felt supported by their presence. When a horse died, it felt like losing a friend who had stayed loyal and faced the dangers of the front together with them. Dogs were also very important during the war. They were trained for many tasks, such as carrying messages between units, finding enemies, and searching for wounded soldiers on the battlefield. Some dogs carried small bags with medicine or bandages and stayed with a wounded soldier to keep him warm and calm until help arrived. Other dogs helped guard soldiers and could hear or smell danger before humans noticed anything, which often saved lives. Dogs were also used to detect mines or warn soldiers of attacks. Because life at the front was full of fear and stress, dogs gave soldiers comfort. They were loyal, never judged, and offered unconditional support. For many soldiers, a dog reminded them of normal life at home. Petting a dog or spending a moment with an animal brought a bit of humanity into the middle of war. Carrier pigeons also played a surprisingly big role. When radio communication was unsafe, disturbed, or impossible, pigeons were used to deliver important messages. These small birds were trained to always fly back to their home loft, even over long distances. They flew through smoke, rain, snow, and sometimes even enemy fire to bring crucial information. One single flight could mean the difference between life and death for many soldiers. For example, by bringing help in time or preventing an attack. One of the most remarkable and touching stories from the Second World War is the story of Wojtek the bear. Soldiers of the Polish Second Corps found him as a small cub in the Middle East, in Iran, after he had lost his mother. She had probably been killed by hunters. The soldiers decided not to leave the young animal behind and took him with them to their camp. They cared for him as if he were one of them. Because he was still so young, they fed him milk from a bottle like a baby, and later fruit and leftover food from the soldiers. Wojtek grew up among the soldiers and became completely used to army life. He played with them, wrestled for fun, slept in their tents, and followed them everywhere. He even learned typical soldier habits, like drinking water, and sometimes beer, from bottles and standing on his hind legs to get a better view. For many soldiers, Wojtek felt like a mascot, but also like a friend who helped them forget homesickness, fear, and sadness. In a time when death and danger were always present, he brought joy and a sense of normal life. When the soldiers later travelled through Egypt to Italy to fight there, Wojtek simply went with them. To take him on transport ships, he was officially registered as a soldier in the Polish army. He received a rank, a service number, and became an official member of the unit. This made his story even more unique. Wojtek was not just an animal, but literally a soldier. During the heavy fighting at Monte Cassino, something happened that made him legendary. While soldiers were under great pressure to move heavy boxes of ammunition and shells, Wojtek began copying them. He walked upright on his hind legs and carried the boxes of shells to the right place without any visible effort. Even though he probably did not understand what he was doing, he helped the soldiers a lot and lifted their spirits. The sight of a bear calmly carrying ammunition in the middle of chaos and danger left a deep impression. Wojtek became so important to the group that the unit's emblem was changed. It showed a bear carrying a shell as a symbol of their special companion. For the soldiers, Wojtek was not only a helper in battle, but also a source of humour, comfort and connection. He brought warmth and humanity to a time that was often cold, harsh and inhuman. His story shows that even in the darkest periods of history, friendship and compassion can still exist. Besides the well-known animals, mules were also used on a large scale, especially in mountainous areas such as Italy and the Balkans. In steep, narrow mountain passes where vehicles could not go, mules were often the only way to transport food, weapons, and medical supplies. They were strong, sure-footed, and used to rough terrain. They also walked long distances under difficult conditions and were exposed to gunfire and bad weather. Their work was dangerous, but essential for the survival of entire army units. In desert regions, such as North Africa and the Middle East, camels were used. Camels could go a long time without water and were better able to handle heat than humans or vehicles. They carried supplies, weapons, and sometimes even wounded soldiers across vast, hot landscapes. For soldiers, camels were indispensable in places where modern equipment failed. At the same time, these animals also suffered from exhaustion and extreme conditions. Even smaller animals played a role. Cats were taken onto ships, into barracks, and into trenches to keep rats and mice away from food supplies. Rats were not only a threat to food, but could also spread diseases. Cats helped maintain hygiene and order, but they also provided companionship. For many soldiers, a cat was a small source of calm and a feeling of home in an uncertain environment. Every animal had its own task and contributed in its own way to the war effort. But all these animals had one thing in common: they had no choice. They were used by humans and had to live and work in conditions they did not understand. They did not know why people were fighting, or why danger was everywhere. Many were injured or died, far from their natural habitat or the life they would normally have lived. For a long time, little attention was given to the role of these animals. Most focus went to human heroes and military victories. Only later did people begin to realize how much animals had contributed and how much they had sacrificed. In some countries, monuments have now been built to honor war animals as recognition for their service and suffering. Today, most animals live in peace again, as pets, on farms, or in the wild. But the stories from the Second World War remind us that animals were not silent bystanders. They were part of history and carried the burden of war alongside humans. Stories like that of Wojtek show that even in a time of war, fear, and sadness, there was still room for friendship and connection between humans and animals. Perhaps that is why these stories continue to move us. They reveal the humanity behind the war and remind us that compassion can survive even in the darkest times. That is why these stories deserve to be told and remembered. So when you look at your own pet later, your dog, your cat, your rabbit, or maybe your bird, remember that they also make a difference in your life in their own way. They listen, give warmth, comfort, and companionship, often without you even asking. Just like the animals in the war who helped soldiers, gave them courage, or were simply friends in difficult times, our animals make everyday life a little nicer and safer. Take a moment to really see your pet. Give them a stroke, a hug, or just say hello. Notice how they look at you, how they react, how they appreciate your presence. It's a small gesture, but it reminds us that friendship and loyalty do not only connect people, they also connect us with our animals. Sometimes it's those quiet, simple moments with an animal that make us realize how valuable their companionship is. So remember, appreciate them, cherish them, and let them know they are loved. Because who knows how many small acts of loyalty and quiet heroism happen in your own home every day without you even noticing.